This story is brought to you by the month of Lurve.
The month of Lurve.
Happily Ever After by Vanner. Read by Goombasa. Part 1. Behind the marble counter stood the serene face of a master. A white bandana held back the massive downy mane that coiffed the head of that pony. Around him floated the razor-sharp steel of a dozen knives, each chopping, hacking, and slicing with the precision of a sewing machine. A bead of sweat rolled into his bandana and wicked away as he moved not a muscle. Carrots and green beans were scooped from their chopping block and tossed into the rolling boil of a saucepan with only a tilt of his horn. The chopping of knives and the gurgle of sauces were the only sound that etched from the kitchen. The blue unicorn worked in silence as slips of paper floated past. With nary a look, another plate filled with food floated to the counter. The dinner rush was on, but Pokey was waiting for something much bigger. An earth pony moved in silence as he took away plates laden with food to the 24 ponies that stood in anticipation of the evening's meal. At a corner nearest to the kitchen, a teal unicorn and a cream earth pony sat, enjoying each other's company with a silent smile and a happy stare, as if the world around them didn't matter. The two lovers ignored the earth pony that delivered the food and stayed lost in each other's eyes. A clatter of dishes from the kitchen broke their stare. With a small giggle, they turned at last to their meal. Pokey turned to peer out from the kitchen window and for the tiniest second caught the teal unicorn's eye. With a silent, nearly unnoticed nod, Pokey allowed his knives to clatter to the blocks, and a bottle of fine champagne rose from the refrigerator to replace them. With a flip of his horn, the cork popped and two fine-stemmed flutes rose to meet the flowing bubbly. Flutes held aloft with the twinkle of magic, Pokey strode from the kitchen into the dining hall. The two ponies returned to staring into each other's eyes, and the world again disappeared around them. The restaurant was silent as the blue unicorn strode across the floor. No pony had ever seen him leave the kitchen for anything during the dinner rush. A dozen pairs of eyes followed the blue unicorn, but two sets stayed lost in each other. Lyra caught him from the corner of her eye and turned to face a friend. Bonbon looked up at Pokey. The grim visage of a pony harried by work stared back. "We didn't order champagne," said Bonbon. "On the house," said Pokey. Murmurs filled the room. Pokey was known to be generous, but champagne? This time of year? They watched as the chef smiled at Bonbon, then nodded to Lyra. Lyra stood up on her back legs and lifted the glass of champagne from the table with a wave of her horn. "Fillies and gentle colts," she said. "Many of you have seen love in your life, and many of you have found that one special pony that makes you happy beyond measure. For me, that is my Bonbon." She gestured to Bonbon with a wave of her hoof. "Bonbon is the most amazing mare I have ever met. She took me in when I was cold and alone on the streets of Ponyville. In sickness, she cared for me, and in health, she has loved me. To her, the eccentricities of who I am, and that which I aspire to be, are what she loves about me. Her heart is that of gold, and her eyes are infinite aquamarine to lose yourself in. She has been my everything for these few years, and for that, I want to spend the rest of my life with her." Lyra turned to the mare of her dreams and got down on one knee. From her purse floated a necklace. As it caught the light of a dozen candles, the sparkle of a single majestic diamond filled the room. Bonbon drew a hoof to her mouth in a gasp. As Lyra clasped the necklace around Bonbon's neck, she took her hoof and stared into her eyes. "Bonbon, will you marry me?" Despite the late hour, the echoing raps of hooves on wood summoned the proprietor of Carousel Boutique to the front door. With a smile, Rarity welcomed Pokey into her shop and her home. The smile across his own face told her everything she needed to know. "I haven't designed wedding dresses for months," said Rarity in a giddy squeal. "And two for the same wedding. I haven't been this excited in... well, I don't even remember. I can only hope I'm not too flushed with excitement of it all. A real noble wedding right here in my little town of Ponyville. I simply cannot wait." "It might be in Canterlot," said Pokey. "Lyra does have some expectations to meet, even if she is on the lowest tiers of the aristocracy." Rarity dismissed the notion with a wave of her hoof. "Oh, that's nonsense," said Rarity. With Princess Luna back on the throne, the nobility has gotten itself in a tizzy about how they're finally coming back into favor. We have our princesses and our mayors. We don't need more government, especially not from those types. A pounding from upstairs filled the lull in the conversation and demanded attention. Rarity's sapphire eyes rolled up to the ceiling with a weighty sigh. Was it really necessary to tie her up? You saw how she reacted to the necklace, said Pokey. We couldn't have her spoiling the surprise. Their hooves gently tapped upon the stairs as they trotted up and into Rarity's living quarters. On the floor, bound hoof and snout with lavender ribbon, was Pinkie Pie. She bounced from the rug toward the two unicorns, mumbling something incomprehensible. Pokey leaned down and with a flick of his horn sent the ribbons to the ground in tatters. "Now what did you go and do that for?" demanded Pinkie as she bounded to her hooves. "I can keep a secret better than any of you. What about all those surprise parties, Pokey? What about how jealous you were of Fluttershy, Rarity? It's like you ponies don't trust me or something." "We trust you just fine, dearie," said Rarity. "But when you went charging for the restaurant with a bag of streamers, something just had to be done." Pinkie raised a hoof to defend herself against these accusations, but found herself speechless. She lowered her hoof and looked up at the two unicorns. "You mean they didn't want a surprise party?" she asked. "But every pony loves my surprise parties." "That was supposed to be a romantic surprise," said Pokey. "That's a bit different than your normal party. Plus, Lyra asked me to make sure you didn't interfere." "Aww," moaned Pinkie. "I bet I could have made it 10 times as romantic. I've got heart streamers, heart balloons, and we could have had a band and—" "On the other hand," said Rarity, "Lyra did mention that she needed a wedding planner." Pinkie's eyes lit up again, and a million-watt smile filled her face. "You think she'd let me plan the wedding?" she asked. "Oh, it'll be the biggest party Ponyville's ever seen!" With that, Pinkie shot down the stairs and through the door of Carousel Boutique in a streak of pink. The ponies exchanged a shrug before Pokey turned to leave the store. "Do you think she's up to it?" asked Rarity. "Pinkie?" asked Pokey. "That mare's got more than a sack of coffee beans. If anyone can pull off the wedding of the century, it's her." He smiled and with a chuckle looked to the home of his friends. "And no two ponies deserve a happily ever after more than those two." A pink blur filled the streets of Ponyville as Pinkie homed in on her target. As the home of the newly engaged couple came into view, Pinkie slammed on the brakes. With a spray of dirt, Pinkie skidded to a halt in front of a small thatched cottage. Lyra answered the rapping of hooves a moment later to find Pinkie practically vibrating with excitement. "I just heard the great news," said Pinkie. "I mean, I knew about it earlier, but Pokey tied me up in Rarity's store so I couldn't go here to his restaurant to spoil the surprise, but it wouldn't have been spoiled because it would have been better with the balloons and streamers and 6-piece bands and clowns and—" She paused to inhale, then leaned against the doorframe with a smug smile. "So, I hear you need a wedding planner." Lyra blinked in amazement as Pinkie stood there grinning. She'd been engaged less than 2 hours, and already ponies were lining up to help her. She was sure that tomorrow every pony in Ponyville would turn up to offer a helping hoof. It would be a nice change from all the stuffy weddings of Canterlot, and, even if all proved to be a giant Pinkie-powered fiasco, it would still be the best wedding that Ponyville had to offer. "Pinkie, dear," said Lyra, "I appreciate your offer, but we haven't even set a date yet. We just got home from the restaurant, and we were going to celebrate our engagement together." "Well, that's great," said Pinkie. "It's kind of late, but I can definitely put together a party on short notice. I'll run home and grab my streamers, you get the punch, and—" "I meant alone," said Lyra. "Ooh, a party for 2, said Pinkie. She popped a party hat over Lyra's horn and stuffed a noisemaker into her mouth. Lyra responded with a confused "Fwee." "I love parties for 2, said Pinkie. "They're so much fun. You know a pony is having a good time when you get to have a party with them. I'll come see you guys first thing tomorrow." Pinkie bounced away from Bonbon's cottage, humming a tune that sounded suspiciously like the Can-Can. Lyra stood dumbfounded at the door for a moment before turning back into the house. As she walked through her living room, the quiet sounds of a string quartet came on over the radio. Inspired by the melody, Lyra sat on her back hooves and danced through her living room. She plucked a rose from the vase atop the coffee table and waltzed into the kitchen to find Bonbon scratching pencil to parchment. Bonbon looked up to see Lyra leaning against the doorframe, a rose held in her smile. "So, my little confection," said Lyra, "how you doing?" "Where did you get that party hat?" asked Bonbon. When Lyra emerged from Bonbon's cottage the next morning, she gathered up her morning paper to discover the headline blared the announcement of her engagement. She lowered the paper to find a mob of 24 ponies waiting at her doorstep with eager smiles. From the back of the crowd, a streak of pink bowled through the herd. "Hi," said Pinkie. "It's tomorrow. I told every pony in Ponyville about your engagement, and I had Snappy Scoops change the headlines from something about boring climate change to your announcement because he owed me a favor from his mom's birthday party. Then I gathered up every pony who could do anything for weddings and brought them here so we could help you with your wedding, because this is going to be the biggest party that Ponyville has ever seen." Pinkie paused a moment. "Hey, how did your 2-pony celebration go last night?" Lyra took a step back from Pinkie's exuberant grin. Lyra often wondered how Pinkie stayed so up all the time. Standing this close to her, she could smell the chocolate and coffee on her breath. It was an answer, sure, but it wasn't to a question that needed to be asked at the moment. From the staircase came the clopping hooves of Bonbon, hair still in curlers and wrapped in a dressing gown. She looked at Pinkie for a moment, then to the gathered herd of Ponyville's florists, bakers, and caterers. Bonbon glanced at Lyra for an explanation, to which Lyra only shrugged in confusion. "Pinkie," said Lyra, "we haven't even set a date yet. We just got engaged yesterday. It's not like we're going to—" "Oh, I know that, silly," said Pinkie. "We're not here to plan just yet. I brought every pony here so we could do this." Pinkie Pie dashed into the bush outside Bonbon's cottage and emerged a moment later, clothed in a tux, spats, and top hat. The gathered herd behind her joined in a can-can routine as Pinkie began to sing. "We're here today to celebrate the best couple to ever date here in Equestria. To bring about this wedding day, all your ideas we put in play, so you can have a good time. And there will be wedding cake and baskets for guests to take and pies and cake and punch." Pinkie's song went on for a few more verses, and the ponies behind her kicked up their hooves in a chorus line. Giant feather fans accompanied the routine, as did a choreographed routine involving fireworks and a Pegasus flying over toward the end. Lyra and Bonbon stood stunned on their doorstep as Pinkie skidded to her knees in front of the couple. Her hooves were held wide as the song and dance finished behind her. "So," she panted, "can I plan your wedding?" Lyra and Bonbon took a step back into their home and slammed the door. Pinkie put a hoof to her mouth and yelled into the door, "So is that a maybe?" "We can't let that insane pony plan our wedding," said Bonbon. "What would your parents think if we put on a spectacle like that?" Bonbon paused a moment. "You should write them a letter. We can go to Canterlot and meet them for lunch, and we can look at dresses while we're there. I'll finally get to meet your parents. I can't believe I've never met them before." "And you never will," said Lyra. Bonbon took a step back. "What?" she asked. "Why not?" "Because they hate the idea of me dating a commoner," said Lyra. "I love them dearly, but their ideas that commoners and nobility, such as myself, shouldn't date is about as antiquated as the idea that 2 mayors shouldn't marry." "That's absurd," said Bonbon. "Family is the most important thing in the world, and I refuse to believe that a pony as sweet as you can come from hateful stock." "Doubt it all you want," said Lyra. "I'll send them a letter. If they don't approve, then they're not invited. It's as simple as that." She wrapped her hooves around Bonbon and kissed her cheek. "You are all the family a pony could ever need. You are so good to me," said Bonbon. She lost herself in Lyra's eyes for a moment before a thought occurred to her. "So, what do we do now that we're engaged?" "I guess we start planning," said Lyra. "Let me help," bellowed a voice from the fireplace. "Hey, it's slippery up here. Whoa, ah!" Thumping and crashing echoed from inside the fireplace as a rolling cloud of soot overtook the living room. As the dust settled amid the coughing of the 2 residents, a sooty Pinkie Pie stood from the fireplace. "You should really have your chimney cleaned out at least once a year. I know a great pony who does it cheap." The happy couple looked at each other with distress. "You're not going to leave us alone until we agree to use you as our wedding planner, are you?" asked Bonbon. "Nope," smiled Pinkie. Lyra put a hoof to her face and with a weary sigh dropped her head. "Fine," she said. How much do you charge? Pinkie put a hoof to chin in contemplation. You mean you'll pay me to plan the biggest party in Ponyville history? She asked. She tapped her hoof a few times with the other, as if counting on imaginary fingers. She paused, scribbled a few figures in the air, then erased them with a wave of her tail. How does 10 bits sound and I'll plan everything? How about 100 and you do what we ask? Said Bonbon. 50 and I'll take your ideas into consideration, countered Pinkie. 75 and you can have one surprise, said Bonbon. Final offer. Done, said Pinkie. The two mares shook on it. Pinkie left hoof prints of soot on her way out. Bonbon looked at the hoof prints with a weary sigh. I'll clean it up, said Lyra. I don't have a performance today, and you need to get ready for work. She kissed Bonbon's forehead and patted her flank to get her moving. As Bonbon walked up the stairs, Lyra stood on her back hooves and put her front hooves to her hip. Ha-ha! Now I shall use the broom like a human. Clean it up the normal way, called a voice from upstairs. With the vacuum, then, said Lyra with a boisterous yell. Then, in a whisper, like a human. Further down the street from Bonbon's cottage, Pinkie Pie bounced through the back door of Sugar Cube Corner. With a toss of her mane, she landed her top hat on the coat rack. Mrs. Cake looked at Pinkie's tux a moment before turning back to her frosting. There was a clattering from upstairs before Pinkie trotted back down wearing her apron. Did you have a good time, dear? Asked Mrs. Cake. Well, said Pinkie. Twinkle was off rhyming for half the performance, and Medley clearly didn't memorize the song. I mean, she forgot her verse, and she had a whole 2 hours to learn it. I just assumed we didn't need practice, but no. I thought with all the musical numbers we had around here, ponies would be good at them by now. That's nice, dear, said Mrs. Cake. She ignored Pinkie's prattling about drill team precision for spontaneous musical numbers as she continued frosting the cupcakes. When she finished, Mrs. Cake tied a ribbon around the stack and pushed it at Pinkie. I've got a delivery for the Balloons Cafe, said Mrs. Cake. If you see Pokey, give him this invoice, too. Pinkie's face lit up. She hadn't seen her friend in, hours now, and Pokey was always happy to see her. She slapped the invoice on top of the box of cakes and wheeled the cart out into Ponyville. As the streets churned beneath her hooves, Pinkie considered her role as a professional wedding planner. She was already getting paid to plan a party to the specifications of a customer. While that did limit the type of party she could throw, it would prove to be an excellent exercise in restraint and elegant planning. Pinkie looked to the sky to see a clear new day emerging before her. Perhaps it was time for her parties to grow up a bit from their usual raucous extravaganza. Perhaps it was time to grow up a little bit. Nah, she said to herself with a giggle. The cart eventually came to a halt behind the single-story restaurant where Pokey levitated trash bags into the dumpster. Hi! Well, morning, Pinkie, said Pokey. I heard your routine went pretty well. Oh, you'd be surprised how fast you can gather up 24 ponies if you offer them donuts, said Pinkie. Where were you this morning? Instead of speaking, Pokey floated the Ponyville Gazette in front of Pinkie's face. Is this your doing? Asked Pokey. She looked at the paper a moment and scanned the articles. Oh, wow, she said. 2 for 1 at Quills and Sofas. Davenport is a genius. Not that... Wait, 2 for 1? The paper flipped as Pokey scanned it. Ooh, I could use a new sofa. No, not that. The headline and the article. Why did you tell the paper everything I told you? Lyra's going to be mad at me for telling their life story. Why didn't you even ask me? Because Carrot Top and Derpy were busy, said Pinkie. And I wasn't? Asked Pokey. You tied me up with streamers and tickled my hooves till I told you what you wanted to know. They were paper, and I couldn't cut them. Where do you buy streamers like that? I did it because you weren't talking, said Pinkie, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. I can't let a simple thing like ticklish hooves stand in the way of the wedding of the century. I need to know things to make the best parties, and if I need to know it, I need to know it. Pokey placed a hoof to his face and took a deep, patient breath. The Ponyville Gazette floated to the recycling bin, only to be replaced with the Equestria Daily. The paper shuffled with a twinkle to reveal the Life section. Sure enough, on the front page was a photo of Lyra and Bonbon with their engagement announcement. Oh, that's great, said Pinkie. I didn't even plan that. They're going to save so much money for Lyra and Bonbon. Free publicity! I'm the best wedding planner ever.
Pinkie, said Pokey, you can't even imagine how much of a problem this is going to cause.
Why is 2 ponies getting married a problem, Pokey?
Pinkie gasped and backed away from her friend.
Are you jealous that you're not getting to plan the wedding? Did you think I wouldn't ask you to cater it? You're one of the best chefs in Ponyville.
What? Asked Pokey. I mean, no, that's not it at all. Lyra's a noble and a unicorn. Bonbon isn't either of those things.
So?
Asked Pinkie.
That's what makes it a great party. It's a party because some pony else is paying for it.
Pokey only sighed and looked back to his kitchen. Orders were starting to pile up as ponies came in for lunch. The cake cart jerked back as Pokey's magic grabbed the handle. I'll explain later, said Pokey as he wheeled the baked goods into his shop. But don't be surprised if you start running into problems planning this wedding sooner rather than later. Not every pony is going to be happy for them. Pinkie dismissed Pokey's concerns with a wave.
You're such a kidder, said Pinkie. Every pony is going to be super excited for the wedding. I just know it.
As Pinkie bounced her way through the streets of Ponyville, she passed Bonbon's bonbons in a state of such bliss that she didn't notice 2 dapper unicorns entering the candy shop. As the tinkle of the shop bell sounded behind them, the green and white unicorns paused a moment to take in the marvels of confection that surrounded them. Inside the shop, the air was heavy with the scent of caramel and taffy. Hints of peppermint fluttered on the breeze, and the heavy scent of chocolate wrapped around their noses. The walls were covered in bins filled with cellophane-wrapped treats of all varieties. Chocolates, taffies, and hard candies of every stripe tempted the unicorns from every angle. My goodness, said the white unicorn stallion. Have you ever seen so much candy? Never in my life, Star, said the green unicorn mare. I always knew our little Lyra had a sweet tooth. I guess it should make sense that she'd pursue a candy maker.
Comin',
called Bonbon from the back room. Her cream face had been masked white with powdered sugar, and her white apron stained dark with splotches of chocolate. She trotted from the kitchen behind the counter to greet her guests.
I don't believe I've seen you in town before, she said with a smile. Welcome to Bonbon's Bonbons, Ponyville's finest candy shop for 3 generations. I'm Bonbon, and these... She gestured to the galaxy of confections before her. Are my bonbons. Since you're new in town, please have a sample of anything you like. As the 2 unicorns each sampled a sugary treat, Bonbon caught a glimpse of familiar features from her new customers. As they sniffed around, she realized that she had, in fact, seen them before. Not in person, but in photographs. Were these ponies famous? From the way they were dressed, they looked as if they were nobility. Nobility. Her eyes went wide as it dawned on her just who had come into her shop. Her cheerful smile faded to a grin of fear as the white unicorn approached her with a bag of peppermints. Hello, Miss Bonbon, said the unicorn. He looked down at her necklace, then back to her. My name is Stardream, and this is my wife, Strawberry Lime. We're Lyra's parents. Ah, Bonbon stammered. It's, so nice to finally meet you, she said.
I hear tell that a certain unicorn asked you a question last night, said Strawberry Lime as she pushed a few bits to Bonbon.
How did you know?
Asked Bonbon.
Derpy just got the mail a few hours ago. I can't imagine that Lyra's letter got to you that quickly.
From Strawberry's saddlebag floated a copy of Equestria Daily's Life section. It was the picture of her and Lyra sitting on a bench together that grabbed her attention. The headline read, Baroness Lyra to marry candymaker from Ponyville. Bonbon noticed they spelled her name wrong. Yes, members of the nobility, said Stardream. We are required by custom to ask you to break your engagement with our daughter because of your non-noble heritage. Bonbon blinked in amazement at the statement. It's simply a formality, you see, and... Star! Scolded Strawberry Lime.
I'm sorry, said Bonbon. Are you asking me not to marry Lyra?
Well, yes, said Star, but...
You came all the way from your gilded towers in Canterlot to ask me that?
Her voice was flat and calm, concealing the sort of apoplectic rage that would have given a lesser pony a stroke. The tiny swinging door that separated the shop from the counter snapped off its hinges as she shoved it out of the way. And then you come into my store to ask me, a pony you've never met before, to give up the mare of my dreams. She prodded Stardream in the chest with a hoof to punctuate the sentence. The two unicorns nodded as they backed away in terror. So, that's a no? Asked Stardream. Get out of my store! Shrieked Bonbon. The two unicorns bolted for the exit in a tangle of hooves and candy wrappers. Bonbon stood seething for a moment as the unicorns fled through the streets of Ponyville. As she lost sight of them, she stumbled to the wall and steadied herself with a hoof. As the tears of anger washed the sugar from her face, an orange-maned pony burst through the front door. "What was that?" asked Carrot Top. "Who were those ponies? Why were you screaming at them? What's wrong?" Bonbon wrapped her arms around her friend and began sobbing into her mane. Carrot Top helped Bonbon to her feet and helped her into the back room where the candy mixers churned in quiet contentment. Bonbon sat on the floor in a sobbing heap as Carrot Top stroked her hair. "Come on now, sweetie. Talk to me. It can't be that bad." "That was Lyra's parents," sobbed Bonbon. "They want me to break off the engagement. I've been engaged less than a day and already ponies are coming after me. I just want my Lyra. Why can't I have my Lyra?" "Her parents?" asked Carrot Top. "Those lousy—" She muttered something else that sounded suspiciously like profanity. "Sweetie, go home. I'll take care of your shop. Then I'll take care of this, all right? Don't you worry about a thing. Carrot Top's going to make it all better." "You said what?" demanded Lyra. The entire restaurant turned to face the family of unicorns that sat inside the cafe. "Are you insane? Do you really hate me that much?" "She didn't let us finish," said Stardream. "Custom dictates that if a noble is engaged to a commoner, then—" "I asked her, you idiot!" Lyra shouted. "Yesterday! Not even 16 hours ago! At this table!" She pointed to the picture of herself and Bonbon that someone had tacked to the wall. It was a picture of Lyra on bent knee just after she had clasped the necklace. "What in Celestia's Equestria is wrong with you two?" "Is there a problem here?" asked Pokey. He had descended upon the table with the silence of a jaguar and stood glaring at Lyra's parents with the menacing presence of a manticore. "I don't know who you are, but I won't have you upsetting my friends." "It's okay, Pokey," said Lyra. "These two idiots are my parents, and they were just explaining how big of idiots they are." Pokey nodded and made his way back to the kitchen. "I was about to tell you," continued Stardream, "that custom dictates if a noble is engaged to a commoner that the noble family must ask the commoner to reconsider the engagement. But," he said, raising a hoof to interrupt his daughter, "if she had let me finish, she would have heard me say that I don't care for tradition anyway." He put his hoof down. "Times are changing, Lyra. We may come from old money, but we didn't keep it this long because we're stupid. Even with the noble titles, we still have to make our own sound decisions. Despite your refusal to bring Bonbon to meet us, we've done some checking up on her." From a coat pocket floated a book of pictures and notes that scattered across the table. Lyra fluttered through the pictures a moment and pored over the documents. It was an entire history of the candy maker, from her birth to a family of candy makers up through her tax records from last year. There was even her one arrest for attempted assault when she accidentally served her cinnamon ginger fireballs to a visiting noble. Lyra threw down the papers in disgust. "You've been spying on us," said Lyra. "I could have told you anything you wanted. I already know all this. I know her parents and her sisters. She's the love of my life. Don't you think I paid attention to these things? She's not after our money." "We know that, dear," said Strawberry. "And we just wanted to make sure. I mean, look at these photographs." She pointed to the pictures of the mares standing together on a bridge in the sunset to another of Bonbon watching Lyra on stage. "Just because we haven't met her doesn't mean we haven't been watching you two. We do attend your concerts when you're in Canterlot, and we've seen the way she looks at you. It's—" She paused a moment to come up with the perfect word. "She looks at you as if you're her entire world. Love like that doesn't come but once a lifetime. Even your father and I never had it." "Your marriage was arranged," said Lyra, "and you've been so deep in all that nobility nonsense that I just figured you'd hate Bonbon for being common." You never even gave us a chance to meet her, said Stardream. And I'm afraid our first impression wasn't what we were hoping for. Would you explain it to her, and see if she'll give us another chance?
Lyra buried her head in her hooves with an exasperated grumble. Why did you go to see Bon Bon without coming to me first? Lyra asked. Because of your father's sweet tooth, said Strawberry Lime. We just had to stop and get some peppermint sticks, and now because some pony couldn't keep their mouth shut. Strawberry glared at her husband. We had planned to come to your house and ask you to invite Bon Bon's parents to dinner, the 6 of us having a nice, quiet meal to get to know each other. But since your father decided to torpedo our first impression, maybe we'll come back another time. Lyra simply shook her head. I'll go talk to Bon Bon and see if her parents are free this evening, said Lyra. You can, I don't know, walk around town, go to the library, take in a show, go to Sugar Cube Corner and meet the wedding planner.
You have a wedding planner already?
She kinda forced herself on us, said Lyra. Don't worry, Pinkie Pie is harmless. A chuckle floated from the kitchen at Lyra's remark. She put a hoof to the side of her mouth and yelled into the kitchen, Shut up, Pokey, no pony asked you. Maniacal laughter echoed from the kitchen in response. Lyra only grumbled something uncouth. Further down the street from Balloon's Cafe, a magenta mare stumbled through the door of Bon Bon's Bonbons. With a moan, the mare flopped her head on the counter and gurgled something unintelligible. Carrot Top came from the kitchen a moment later to find Berry Punch snoring on Bon Bon's counter. Are you drunk again? Said Carrot Top. So tired, whined Berry. Pinkie had a fever for a week and she keeps waking up in tears every night. I haven't slept in 3 nights. She looked up at Carrot Top from the counter. You're not Bon Bon. Carrot Top only lowered an eyebrow at that remark. What are you doing here anyway? Asked Carrot Top. This isn't a liquor store. Hey, I haven't even had a drink in a week, protested Berry Punch. When Pinkie's sick, that's all that matters. I don't need you judging me for being a bad parent. I get enough of that from Full Protective Services. Bunch of nosy, rotten, lousy... Her rant faded off into a snore as she laid her head back on the counter. She snapped awake again a moment later and darted her head around the candy store. So where is Bon Bon anyway? We were supposed to have lunch today. Lyra's parents came to town, said Carrot Top. They said some things that upset her and she went home. I don't think she's feeling up to company right now. I'll cut 'em, snapped Berry. I need a bottle. Go get me one of those bottles marked liqueur. Bottom shelf, right side of the kitchen. Carrot Top only shook her head. Go home, said Carrot Top. I've got all this taken care of. After I close up, I'm going to find those snotty unicorns and give them what for. She punched one hoof into another. Beatdowns are my thing, said Berry. I've already got a record. You don't want to go getting yourself busted for something like that. Leave it to the professionals. Are you saying you're a hit pony? Asked Carrot Top. What happened to you being the school's janitor? It's kind of the same thing, said Berry Punch. They both involve taking out trash and sweet kung fu moves. Berry struck a pose that left Carrot Top positively tepid. Are you sure you're not drunk? Berry Punch would have argued the point if the door hadn't opened behind her with the tinkle of bells. The 2 mares turned to greet the customers, only to find it was Lyra and 2 unicorns that had come in. Carrot Top pointed a hoof. That's them, said Carrot Top. The yellow mare dove over the counter with a growl. Berry Punch grabbed the nearest bottle she could find, which was a wax bottle filled with colorful sugar solution. She went to shatter it, only to find that the wax bottle wouldn't break against the counter. Carrot Top stood confused a moment before turning her attention back to the unicorns. What in the name of Celestia are you 2 doing? Asked Lyra. Revenging, said Berry Punch. None shall sully the honor of Bon Bon while we live. Oh shoot, this bottle's leaking. She tossed the wax bottle aside before licking the syrup off her face. Hey, these are really good. Carrot, you gotta try this. Are you drunk? Asked Lyra. She shook her head. Look, you're not going to be revenging anything. These are my parents, and yes, they upset Bon Bon, but they're here to apologize. Where is she? She went home, said Carrot Top.
She was crying and miserable after talking to those two. She glared at the two unicorns. So I said I'd watch the store for her. I'd suggest treading lightly, Mr. and Mrs. Lyra's parents. Every pony in Ponyville loves Bonbon, and if you have plans to mess up her wedding, then I think you'd better just leave town before things get ugly. Berry Punch growled to emphasize Carrot's point. Lyra just put a hoof to her face and took a deep, exasperated breath. I'll explain everything later, said Lyra. For right now, would you two please go tell Bonbon's parents to meet us tonight at 8. Everything will be better by then, I promise. When Lyra made her way home, she found Bonbon sobbing on the couch and shoveling candy into her mouth. Bonbon was a wreck. Her face was covered in smears of chocolate and fresh tears. Lyra sat on the couch beside her and put her hooves around her. It's okay, sweetheart, said Lyra. No, it's not okay, blubbered Bonbon. Why do your parents hate me? We've never even met before and they hate me, she whimpered, unwrapping another chocolate. They don't hate you, said Lyra. Dad's just kinda dumb. He sticks his hoof in his mouth more often than I do, and that's saying something. He wants us to get married, but he's a stickler for tradition. Bonbon sniffed and looked up at Lyra. Lyra looked to the ceiling as she tried to remember the story her father had told her all those years ago. Once upon a time, back when nobility really mattered, commoners and nobles were forbidden from being together because the nobles kept abusing their power. One day, Celestia saw a duke secreting a meeting with a scullery maid. Celestia figured that he was just using her, and she dropped in to admonish him for lording his power over a commoner. The duke stood up to Celestia and told her that the maid was to be his wife. Celestia then asked the maid if she would break the engagement. Of course she refused, continued Lyra. Celestia then stripped the duke of his title and banished him from the kingdom with his maid. When he came to her office to return the trappings of nobility, a wedding officiated by the princess herself was waiting for the two ponies. She decreed that true love was more important than titles, and that everywhere that love bloomed was a place to be held sacred. Lyra smiled at her bonbon and nuzzled her head. It's a test, you see. The parents of a noble will always tell a commoner to break the engagement. If they agree because they're afraid of the parents, then that's not true love, and it's not meant to be. You, my darling bonbon, she said with a kiss, terrified two nobles out of your store and nearly got my father stomped by Pokey for upsetting me. So you win. Bonbon sniffed again before smiling. So, you mean they really want us to get married? Absolutely, said Lyra. In fact, they're waiting outside as we speak. She wiped a smear of chocolate off Bonbon's face. Might want to go get cleaned up first. You don't want to meet your future in-laws covered in dark chocolate. A few minutes later, Bonbon emerged from her cottage to be greeted by the awkward smiles of Stardream and Strawberry Lime. Stardream stepped forward and doffed his top hat. Bonbon, I just wanted to apologize for earlier, he stammered. And I want you to know that you, It's okay, smiled Bonbon. We commoners have a tradition too. It's called forgive and forget. I shouldn't have snapped at you like that, but when I thought you were going to take away my Lyra, I just lost it. I'm sorry, I should have heard you out. Bonbon extended a hoof. Friends? Strawberry Lime and Stardream shook hooves with her, and, after a few more minutes of talking, the four ponies set off into town to meet Bonbon's parents. A pair of eyes narrowed from across the street as the ponies walked away from Bonbon's cottage. The pony scribbled something down on a sheet of parchment and dropped it into a nearby mailbox. With a disgusted huff, the pony walked away from the mailbox. We'll just see about that. To be continued.